Greetings. I'm Michael Reed Trice, and this is the Religica Theolab. The Theolab is a place where spiritual pathways, religious traditions, and indigenous wisdom meet some of the challenges of our everyday lives and world. Blogs, podcasts, resources, and increasingly, conversations in local communities meet here. Like any laboratory, with hundreds of podcasts, blogs, and resources, this is a place of mixing ideas, of finding solutions, and seeking wisdom. In the past 2 years, the Religica Theolab reached over 1 million people with stories, audio and video, that seek to connect us and to reassure us. With all the pain in our world, we all can recognize deeper values that shape us. Did you know, across belief systems, these values rise from far back, way back in time, before our families, our communities, love, justice, truth, the virtues of society, beauty, equitability, the importance of story, the nature of creativity, and more. And where we see current distrust and pain, we still have a way, together, to deeper visible unity in the world. And this laboratory is about seeking that unity. The Religica Theolab is a collection of students, faculty, friends, and you. I created it in 2018 and brought the faculty laboratory with me today, where I serve as director at the Center for Religious Wisdom and World Affairs and as a constructive theologian at Seattle University. I encourage you to take a look at the Religica Theolab and to visit us at the Center for Religious Wisdom and World Affairs as well at www.seattleu.edu/the center. Thank you.
President of the Lutheran Ecumenical Network, and as David said, was honored to be able to be national chair for a few cycles for the workshop as well. So I'm hosting today this session, which is titled Religica, the Whole Inhabited House, Virtual Spiritual Proximity. So just a quick word about Religica, and then we'll do introductions of our panel team here today. So this is a project about involvement in dialogue across spiritual traditions. So how shared values of people of faith can address discord in society, violence against people, care for the planet, and other challenges where a religious voice is needed and has a role. Part of what we've done with setting up Religica is to make a commitment to help religious leaders, global, national, local, to deepen their awareness of the wisdom they have and can share with other people of faith, including ecumenical partners, interreligious or interfaith colleagues, and others on spiritual journeys. You know, clearly we have much to learn from one another. We're a 21st century resource. So we're based on the traditions which have been handed down through the ages, but we work with this online format that we'll introduce to you today that includes podcasts, blogs, news feeds, all around spiritual themes of discovery, exploration, pilgrimage, and destination. So I'm going to take a quick minute to introduce the founder of Religica here. So Reverend Dr. Michael Trice, who will then introduce the rest of the team here. Michael's no stranger to the workshop. I mean, he was a key participant in its planning and organization for a number of years in his capacity in the Office of Ecumenical and Interreligious Affairs or Relations for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I just noted, Michael, as we were preparing, this year marks the 20th anniversary of Young Ecumenists, which something he was very integral in establishing for the workshop. So he's the director for the Center for Religious Wisdom and World Affairs at Seattle University. It's a Jesuit institution. I might quickly note his ordination into the office of the Holy Ministry in the Lutheran Church is a result of his call to Seattle University, along with the Northwest Washington Synod of the ELCA. He's also a professor of ethics and constructive theology there at Seattle U, and is the founder of Religica, so which we'll learn more about right now. So Michael, we'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you so very much, Rocky. I'm going to give the team an opportunity to introduce themselves. This is a great cadre of professionals and leaders in their own right, and it's my real pleasure to be associated with them. Rocky, I'm so grateful for your introduction. The one item I might just add to that would be, it's been a real privilege of service to be a part of the Faith and Order Commission through the National Council of Churches since 2004, and working in that capacity with so many colleagues over all these years has just been a signature kind of vocational essential moment for my own development in ministry. And I'm grateful for that, and for many of you here who have also participated in Faith and Order in one form or another. Let me now just ask Megan Anderson, Jessica Cattle, and then Trish Brownlee, perhaps in that order, to introduce themselves as part of the Religica team, and then we'll continue from there. Megan, you're first.
Thank you, Michael. It's wonderful to meet you all, and I'm the Blogcast editor at Religica. Started off doing blogs, and you'll hear momentarily what a blogcast is and why we've moved there. But that's my primary engagement. I've done a little bit with podcast at Religica as well. In my background, I have a background doing religious news and articles at the Interfaith Observer for a long time, and then now just working on other various nonprofits. But really grateful to be here and to meet you all and to describe the wonderful things that Religica is doing.
And Jessica.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessica. I'm a social media specialist at Religica. I am speaking to you from London here. You may pick it up from the accent. And I have a background in, I've got a master's in arts leadership, and I'm a visual artist. And I'm also a social media consultant and specialist. So I am all knowledge about how social media works, and I'm going to be talking to you about that later on. Thank you. Over to you, Trish.
Thank you, Jessica and Michael and Megan. I'm Trish Brownlee. I am Religica's Webmaster and user experience designer, and I will explain a little bit more about what that is and how that works. I have my MFA from Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland, Oregon, and I have 2 years of postgraduate studies in theology at the School of Theology and Ministry at Seattle U. And I am Unitarian University, excuse me, I couldn't say my name. Unitarian Universalist aspirant, which is the first step towards chaplaincy and ministry. And so I'm looking forward to sharing everything we've created with you. I'll turn it back over to Michael.
Thank you very much. And I will go ahead and just start then. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Religica. And we do want to showcase a lot of what we do, so that in the next 35 to 40 minutes, all of you who are viewing have a real sense of what the Religica or Religica platform is doing. Fundamentally, it is a theological laboratory that was originally connected to my work as a faculty for testing the ligature of deeper meaning from religious traditions and spiritual pathways. And I am surrounded by this amazing team that you just heard from. We're creating this vision together. And I am a dedicated ecumenist, whereas before we would discuss our ecumenical and interreligious work, today that effort includes ecumenical colleagues, religious traditions, spiritual pathways, indigenous wisdom, and what Patricia Killen calls the nuns, or the secular and spiritual, but not religious crowd. The lexicon for identifying the pluralism we swim in has only grown, certainly since I entered this field in 1991 as a youth director in Colorado Springs at Prince of Peace Lutheran Church 30 years ago. But for the last 10 years, I've taught a foundational course titled Theology, Ecumenism, and Pluralism, where we discuss the importance of knowing the fibrous religious realities of our communities today. I tell students, there's no assumed audience. There's only the actual audience, vulnerable and seeking at a time through this pandemic age. And part of our collective work, you and me, all of us in this virtual space, is getting as close as possible to that audience or to that community. Do we know their hunger points, their anxieties, their beliefs or hopeful aspirations? And as the president of the Cuban Council of Churches told me last month, do we see ourselves in service to a whole terrain of humanity that includes and also transcends our own particularity? If we do, then as clergy, the whole community is a parish or a congregation. The theology within Religica begins with the premise in 1 Peter 2, 4 through 8, that we are all living stones within the whole inhabited house. Or as some of my Orthodox colleagues will remind me, as church, we are cultivating an interior dynamic life of love and solidarity that is first moving at heart within the economy of the Trinity, so that the oikonomia of visible fellowship, of visible unity, is always a deeper ontology at the center of God's call to every community, all the time and everywhere. But proximity is an issue, there we go, especially in a pandemic age, with all of its disequilibrium and injustices that reveal to us some of the key sicknesses within society. We've learned a lot this year, haven't we, about environmental degradation, about structural injustices and racism and more. And what good colleagues in our midst, like Michael Terrian or Rocky Piro, Mary Evelyn Tucker, or Patricia Killen, and John Borelli, what those colleagues help us to see are how vibrant and important our ecumenical and interreligious responses must be and are needed to be today more than ever. So Religica began on the way to work in 2018 at highway exit 151B, right off the highway. I wanted to create a theological laboratory. It just seemed at this moment we should do so, and we should do it together, where we would do our part to seek deeper spiritual proximity with a community that is inclusive of ecumenical and interreligious colleagues and communities everywhere. If witness is our fundamental ecumenical work, then this is a modality for inspiring a spiritus for human connection around the transcendent. That inspiration is embedded in the work of Laudato Si and the call for an integrated ecology and a deeper wholeness, both in our lives and in the churches. You'll hear this emphasis in much of what Jessica tells us, including both Megan and Trish, about what an integrated ecology feels like in an online community. So Religica first. In a postmodern context, the localized human story is the seat of value, and the wisdom of our traditions arrives through the individual and collective telling of those stories today. Next, in light of this, Religica creates resources to study violence and the environment and videos of religious leaders sharing respective wisdom. And we run a continuous audio series of podcasts and blogcasts, as you'll hear more of. Third, we share these podcasts, these blogcasts, and these resources in a growing network. That network includes Church World Service, the Parliament of the World's Religions, the United Nations Faith for Earth Initiative led by Iyad Ubumogli, the National Council of Churches, and also national to regional offices for ecumenical and interreligious agencies. And finally, we seek out new voices in local communities, and that's what's just so essential in your communities and mine, those voices, so that you'll share your stories with us. We are currently developing an ecumenical story core, and the Religica team desires to be in contact with you. So I would encourage you to be in contact with us first. Where you see an opportunity there at the end of this, this time together, to send us your contact information, we'd appreciate it. I just want to highlight a couple of successes before we hand it over to Megan. First, in terms of podcasts, everything we do is very tactile. This is not a 35,000 or 20,000 foot operation. Last year, I interviewed the Tree of Life Synagogue Rabbi Eckstein, and also Dr. Ahmed from the Al Noor Mosque pardon me, it's just dropping out of my consciousness. Someone else will remind me as we go, who discusses the loss of over 50 members of his community, New Zealand. And yet also the revolutionary power of interior faith that is a part of his life now. Those are podcasts. Another success in terms of outreach is Jessica will tell us more about how we're gaining a strong community on social media online. Trish will also talk about our total rebranding of the website. And I just want you to know, over the last 2 years, since that exit on 151 in 2018, the Religica site, between all of its modalities and YouTube and Facebook, all the channels and platforms, has reached over 1 million people. We didn't anticipate that. And quantitatively, it was never about the numbers. We were hoping to do something more integrated qualitatively. But we value that. We value those numbers because they tell a qualitative story. The deepest success, the most meaningful success for me, is there's no paywall. There's no marginalization built in. This isn't free, and it's not inexpensive, but it's essential work and we don't charge for people to use these resources, so that these resources are able to be used without any expense in local communities, in classrooms and seminaries, in university contexts, and in adult education. I'm going to pause there and invite my colleague, Megan, to continue next and tell us more about the work she's doing. Megan.
Thanks, Michael. I think that was a beautiful introduction of everything that Religica is doing. As I mentioned in my introduction, I work primarily with our blogcasts, and you may wonder what in fact is a blogcast, and it's a modality that includes both the written word on a blog and then also the spoken word as kind of like a mini podcast, a 2 to 3 mini podcast. And if you haven't heard of Blogcast before, it's because this is something entirely new that our team at Religica created, or at least I haven't seen it anywhere else in my time yet. So as far as I know, this is something that has emerged in Religica. But then you have the question of why we went through the extra effort to add this auditory component to our blogs, because it does take more work to use the files, to edit the files, to put them up on the web. It's more work on our author side as well. And the first reason was we were noticing that there was less engagement on the blogs overall in terms of the work we were doing. And I think part of that is that people today, and especially in today's time, don't have as much time to read, or maybe don't even have as much time with the energy to read. During my work at the Interfaith Observer, where I was an editor of text, I could kind of see that trend happening already. But during COVID, it became even more apparent, because I think people are just overwhelmed. They're trying to do more at home, more at work, multitasking here and there. And so we wanted to go back to the drawing board. And I'll say, even in terms of our writers, once COVID hit, it became difficult to even find people to write 700 to 1,000 word blogs. And so we're like, okay, let's go back to the lab. As Michael has said, this is a laboratory of learning and exploration, and seeing how we really connect with the world. And we're saying, what can we do? How are we going to reach people? Because the ideas and the sentiments that are being shared are valuable. So we decided to go with a shorter format. It's blogs that are about 500 words, it seemed to be a lot easier for the people we reach out to, and then also to record their voice. And this does two things. Number one, it makes the blogs more accessible, because originally, if you have trouble seeing, you can't really engage with our blogs because it's just visual text. And as Michael said, we want to be open, we want to be inclusive, we want everyone possible to have access. And so if people can listen, then they can still hear the blogs without having to see it. And the second piece is that when you hear someone read their text, it's so much more engaging and emotional, because again, the people that are writing about things that are meaningful to them, topics that have spoken to their heart. Because what we do is I send out topics and I say, like, pick the one that speaks to you, or even let me know if there's a topic that speaks to you that I have not listed, and let's discuss it and see if it would fit on Religica's platform. And I think a great example, which I'll share in a moment, is a blogcast I literally received yesterday from Maurice Blum, Church World Service Executive Vice President. And I think his blogcast is really the perfect example of how this written and auditory modality increases the impact, both emotionally and intellectually, of the blogcast overall. And so Maurice wrote about grit in a time like our own. And he started off with talking about his mother, who at 4 years old caught polio and had to be quarantined. Like we're going through a quarantine now, and you can imagine as a 4-year-old being quarantined longer ago. And then even when she recovered, she had a dead arm for the rest of her life. He mentions that, you know, she had an internment camp, and then she dealt with 5 years of Indonesia's war for independence. And he says, you know, like she knew what it meant to have grit. And hopefully when you hear me just speak about it, there's probably something that you can feel inside yourself. It elicits some kind of motion just to hear those words and what she goes through, but it's on a whole different level when you hear Maurice speak it for himself. And so we're just gonna play like maybe the first paragraph of his blog.
My name is Maurice Bloem, and I'm casting a blog to you titled My Mom's Grit. When my mom was 4 years old, she got polio and was quarantined. Can you imagine being such a small child having to be all by yourself? She eventually recovered, but was left with a disability. Her right arm was dead. She spent her whole life living with only one strong arm. It was something I didn't realize until I grew up. She never complained about or mentioned it to me, nor others. Even after spending 3 years in an internment camp during the Second World War, another 5 years surrounded by Indonesia's war for independence, and even after suffering discrimination in a country where she was a citizen, as my parents eventually moved to the Netherlands, she knew what it meant to have grit. My mom knew what it was like to be in a situation where you don't know what tomorrow will bring. This pandemic is the first time ever that I've ever experienced that, but for many of the readers and listeners of this blog, this is not the first immense crisis they have had to deal with. The difference in experience and journeys is important to understand while we discuss this pandemic, something that affects the whole world. I've heard people say that we're all in the same boat, but we aren't. We are in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Many of the people my organization works with around the world know what it is to live with uncertainty, without knowing what tomorrow will bring. So how is this pandemic any different for them? In the poorest neighborhoods in the US, the median household income is less than $35,000, and the COVID-19 infection rate is twice as high as in the nation's wealthiest zip codes, where median income surpasses $75,000. We are in the same storm, but not in the same boat. As we continue to grapple with the ongoing collective trauma of the COVID-19 pandemic, we could all stand to cultivate more grit, says Angela Duckworth, New York Times bestselling author and psychologist. Why? Because when bad things happen unexpectedly, part of having grit is being able to navigate those stormy waters, she explains. Gritty people tend to look for opportunities to learn and grow during challenging times. That means that when a crisis is over, they won't be where they were before it all started. They'll actually be better off. She also points out that it's never too late to develop grit. Or gritty qualities like self-control, tenacity, and stamina, because people never stop developing. So while the future might feel uncertain, and things are largely outside of our control, I have learned from my mom to focus on the things we can change and understand the elements of our situation that are temporary. There are always things in our life we have control over, and that's in our best interest to focus on those things and frame our adversity in what Duckworth refers to as an optimistic, resilient way. I'd like to end this little introspection with an invitation to engage as we keep writing this new chapter in the story of our lives. We can control how this story evolves. Let's continue to walk, talk, listen, but also to dance with joy, like my mom used to do when Glenn Miller's In the Mood blared from our stereo system.
So I think what Maurice's Blogcast points out among the fact that I think there's that emotional charge again from hearing him read his words himself that really creates a spark, and also highlights the fact that a Religica, we really try to focus on themes that are relevant to the times that we're living in, themes that touch on the feelings and the emotions and the struggles and the joys that we're experiencing in this moment, and that are churning and changing our world. And that's the blogcast. And I want to touch briefly on the podcast. Langston is really the mastermind on our team behind the podcast, but he was unable to be here today. So I'm going to do a brief overview for him, although I know he could do a much better job. But the same thing is true of Religica's podcasts. But this modality is obviously longer than 2 to 3 minutes. And so we can spend more time to really capture a person's story. I've had the privilege of recording a few podcasts for Religica, and it's really amazing to me what you can learn when you delve into questions and topics that get at deeper meaning, topics that really touch the soul of the person that you're talking to. One example, the one that Michael has already mentioned, is Piro. His podcast is titled "Violence is Never the Final Word," and he was in the Al Noor Mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, during the shooting where 51 people were murdered on March 15th, 2019. And among those killed was his wife, Husana. And so Mr. Ahmed reflects, on everything that experience, has triggered in him. And he talks about loss. He talks about return. He talks about how violence, as in the title, violence is never the final word. And so that captures a story. That's a person. It's a conversation, but at the end of the day, it's a person. And this is one of our podcasts that has one of the highest listener rates. And I think because of the deep personal nature. And it comes down to the way that Religica approaches recording blogs. Anyone can technically record a blog if they want to. All you basically need is a phone that can record, or anything that record, and you can put it on the internet and you could call it a blog. But not everyone, I think, can record a blog in a way that touches both the listener and the interviewer in the way that Religica's podcasts do. I'm saying blogs, but I meant podcast. I'm very sorry. And what I would say is that our podcasts are in some way a ministry. They require presence, they require compassion, they require an openness to hear and to listen, and to address what I think is a basic human need to be heard. Something that we all need in society in order to really feel valued. And so I encourage you to explore a podcast. I encourage you to explore a blogcast. I encourage you, if you're interested in being part of either of these two, to definitely reach out. We're always looking for people to engage and to feature. And if you have any questions at the end, I am more than happy to answer them. Now I'll turn it over to Jessica.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Megan. Hi, everyone. I am here to talk to you about social media now. So let me just share my screen really quickly. As you've seen, we create fantastic content, podcasts, blogcasts, and we have blogs from the past as well. So we have all that wonderful resources that we then want to share to the world. So how do we do this? Well, one of our methods is social media, and we really use social media as a marketing tool. This really can share out all of our content out there, as well as spreading awareness of our brand. So here I have a few. Here we have our social media plan. So our plan really is to reach new global audiences, build brand awareness, drive audiences to our website, promote Religica custom content, such as our pods and blogcasts and such, engaging our community, and be a source of inspiring and topical information. So as here we have a nice little snapshot of our Facebook followers. So currently we have 835 followers. When I started back over here in May 2019, we had just over 100 followers. And as you can see, the kind of growth over the years now, it's really fantastic to see that growth happening. By using our insights, we're really able to see our the global audience that we now have. We can see our followers demographic and their location. So as you can see here, we have some followers literally from all over the world. We've got people in France, Italy, Florida, Rome, all over the world, which is really great to see. And by keeping track of our analytics, really allows us to know how to, really allows us to know our audience better. So we post our own podcasts, blogcasts, and our blogs and videos to our social media channels. And then sometimes what we do is boost the post. This means that we pay to reach more people. And it's a great way for us to reach new audiences. But also what this allows us to do is direct our followers directly to our website. And we can see this by viewing the analytics. And you can see here we've had like 33 clicks directly onto our website from posting up this one post, which is great. And that's ideally what we want. So we create our own content to post, including topical text. Posts like this have been some of our most successful posts, actually, and you can see there by the kind of engagement that we've been having that I've highlighted in yellow. As we started going into lockdown last spring, I created this post on the left of the page, and we got over 11,000 reactions and over 5,000 shares. This is more than I could ever imagine for a post, and that was one of our highest engagement posts to date. What I think really made this post so successful was not only the imagery of the text, it just being very bold, but the timing, since we were one of the first to showcase inspirational words like this about COVID. This really started conversations and a sense of community, which, especially at that time, was extremely important since we were entering a very difficult and scary time in the world. So these two posts, as you can see, are just extremely successful in the engagement that we had, and the reach is just incredible. We're also posting inspirational bits of text, can share it out into the world. Everyone loves a good image. So we really wanted to be there for our followers and connect with new followers even more as we headed into the lockdown. For paid advertising, we got to choose our target audiences across the world. This was also a way for us to kind of test to see if we could get some new followers from different countries. And we really have gained hundreds of followers by paid advertising. And it doesn't have to be much either. It can just be about $20, and that can actually get us a lot of attraction, which is great. We share motivational, inspirational quotes and affirmations, which we then also sometimes boost. This is another example of a quote that we boosted, and we were able to reach over 8,000 people. And then we also do that as well with our podcasts and blogcasts as well, as you can see there on the left, which reached over 1,000 people. Really, really exciting to see that kind of awareness that we can get with our posts. So in February this year, for Black History Month, we were posting a lot of civil rights leader quotes. And then it came up from Valentine's Day. So I made up this post by Dr. Martin Luther King. So completely perfect for Valentine's Day. We wanted to put a little bit of something out there, and this got wonderful reactions to it, and we didn't actually pay for this post either. It was all organic. So we do like to have the combination of two, of, you know, boosting a post every once in a while, but most of the time we do have organic posts. We also share content from other sites, which keeps our visibility up on our Facebook account. Posts we find normally through topical articles or breaking news. For example, the image that we share from the Hearty Soul on the left here is a post about blue flowers blooming across the Japanese park like a field of fairies. So this was last year when we posted it. And we included the text, "Spring will not be cancelled." It's extremely relevant at a time when the whole world was going into a lockdown, and this reached 317 people organically. Same with the other picture to the right of images across the world with no people. So we really wanted to be on it with sharing very relevant and topical events that are happening in the world. So then as well, back to our fantastic Megan with her blogcasts and then Langston's podcasts. We share them across our social media channels. In the past few months, we've actually rebranded our podcasts and our blogcasts with our Religica branded colours, and using the same format for each image really allows our viewers to really pick up on our imagery. So when they see it pop up on their Facebook feed, they then know it's ours. We've worked really hard with keeping the same format with all the styles of our images, which helps enhance our brand and help our followers recognize our posts. So you've just seen a tiny percent of the content that we share out on our social media channels. We share and create a lot of content from a big variety of resources. We share quotes from current inspirational speakers, such as Amanda Gorman, and then also like timeless quotes by Socrates. We really want to create meaningful moments in our audience lives. We have a focus on sharing content on sustainability and climate change, social movements, popular cultures, breaking news. So like when Notre Dame unfortunately went up in flames last year, we shared that news within about 30 minutes of it hitting the news. So we want it to be at times, you know, one of the first points of news for our followers. And we also share news and events from our religious communities and culture. By using all these resources and the content we share, we hope allows our audience to feel known and noticed, and to be integrated into an online community. As Religica, we are your friend. So alongside of Facebook, which is our probably like our best channel that we use, due to its nature, we're able to share a lot more content with text on Facebook, and this allows people to really go towards our website, which is our primary goal, is to drive our audience to our website. But alongside Facebook, we also use LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And as I said, all these channels really direct our traffic to the website, which then allows our followers to explore even more. And I am going to hand it over to Trish now. She's going to tell you about our website. But just my little thing at the end here, if you're not following us already on social media, I invite you to now at Religica. Thank you for listening, and Trish, over to you.
My name is Trish Brownlee, and I am Religica's webmaster. I almost never am out in front of anyone. I don't usually talk to people, and I am perfectly happy to stay that way most of the time. But in this case, I really needed to come in and kind of talk to you about what it means to be a webmaster, and what my actual title is a user experience designer or a UX designer. I get into that a little bit. So my colleagues have introduced Religica to you. Michael has explained how it started, its story, and what it does in the world. And then Megan got into our content that we create, such as blogcasts, podcasts, and then Jessica shared our social media. And these are the front doors to Religica. Facebook, Instagram, our podcasts, our blogcasts, everywhere that you find these are the front doors to the world of Religica. The website is actually kind of the back garage door that nobody even knows is there. So a lot of times we think, oh, we've put up a website, so now everybody can find my content and I can do good in the world with it. And that's actually not the case. The website's just kind of where everything lives, and everything that Megan and Jessica put out in various ways links back and brings people back to the website. So we have to make sure that it's functional and that when we get there, people find it attractive enough to stay and hang out. So that was not necessarily the case when we started Religica and when I came on board last year. What Michael calls our ethos, which comes out in all of our areas of what we do and the content we create and our staff, how we present, I call branding. It's really the same idea. Does our brand, does our visual approach, does the imagery we choose, do the colors, do they all match our ethos? And that's why you needed a user experience designer on your staff. Not just somebody who can run technology in the background and meet people or break something, but really make sure that when people are coming to your websites, that they're having an experience that is enjoyable. When you walk into a house of worship, it is a sanctuary. It has a feeling, it has a vibe. And that same concept needs to carry over into anything that you're putting out into the world on a website. We put an immense amount of time into meeting, coming together, researching what our brand is, our ethos, and creating the space for it all to live. For me, I'm a full-blown pagan. I am Religica's in-house pagan UU, and I love Religica. I love its stories and its openness to discussion and its ability to reach across belief systems and find commonalities in order to do good in the world. And that's really what the point is that we're trying to do. On our blogcasts and our podcasts, when they go into our social media, and into YouTube, we lose control over them. We don't have the ability to control how people respond, what they say. In fact, some of our most viewed podcasts aren't always the most liked, but people are engaging with them. They're having conversations, and that's the point. So we've created a house, a space for people to spend time and discuss and engage with each other. And I mean, isn't that the point? Theology is words about God, right? So what we've done with Religica is we've created a house or a sanctuary for people to come to, but by using social media and tapping into technology, we are taking our message to the streets, just like it was meant to be. Worship took place in the streets. And we have to realize now that technology and spirituality are not separate, and they have never been since the first Gutenberg printing press. Does anybody, you can unmute, anybody know the first book printed on the Gutenberg printing press? Mouth it, I'll know that you're saying it. It was the Bible. Right?
Bible, yeah.
Bible, but at the time, most people couldn't read it. So that meant that access was limited to academics and clergy. And then as the printing press created, they were able to create more Bibles. They were able to translate it into different languages. They made it more accessible to the world, and that has allowed spirituality and Christianity in particular to grow and change and become what it is today. With that, it becomes controversial. We have to be okay with putting we have to say out into the world with the fact that not everybody's going to like it. Not everybody's going to like the message, but we have to take it to the streets anyway. And in the world we live in now, the streets are the internet. So what Religica has become is a resource that exists in the world, not only for the privileged or the academic or the clergy, but for the lay leaders of the world who are street chaplains, 20-year-old kids, pagans who somehow ended up in STM, social media managers in London, sending out these messages to the world, and everyone is now able to access and use these resources in the streets and the classrooms of the world with an internet connection. I think that's something that we have to remember in theology, is that theologians need to be able to learn how to code switch. And code switching involves technology. They need to speak in languages that people understand and in messages that are relevant to what is happening now in the world. And that's what we're doing in Religica. We are using our ethos, our branding, our technology.
Yeah, her time.
We're keeping it all together. And then we circle back in order to create content and put it out to our communities through storytelling. And that's a cycle that gets repeated over and over again. I'm going to put a bunch of links in our chat, and I know I'm running short on time. I encourage you to check out our handout. Everything in our handout is clickable, and it will take you to all the different areas of our websites and all of our social media. All right, my time is up.
Thanks, Trish.
Michael.
Okay, thank you so much, Trish. Thanks to this team of professionals who've been a part of this journey and have helped clarify this for you. We want to make sure we have plenty of opportunity for questions, and Rocky is moderating those questions now. Of course, in 10 minutes, we won't be able to get to everything, but you can see what we're up to and what we're thinking and what we're refining, remembering it's a theological laboratory as we go. And good, Rocky.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. I was getting a mute symbol and thought that was a little untruthful there. So thanks so much. Yeah, so Michael, I'm going to start with a few questions. So what we've been getting in the Q&A so far is information on our various modes of communication, how to get more information. So we've been answering those just with electronic responses, but I think we want to unmute here and go to just hearing from people who may have questions. So I'll try to just monitor the gallery as we do that. But to start with, Michael, can you talk just very, very quickly about the partnerships, the partners that we have with Religica? I mean, they're global in nature, there's local congregations. And then secondly, how can Religica be a resource for the national workshop in the networks?
So thank you very much, Rocky, also for your attention to this, as we are clearly learning how to do this effectively over the last, all of us actually, we've been talking about this for decades. What are the modalities we create for doing this kind of work together? We don't talk about partners as much as we discuss allies. We don't believe that partners need to be on the same page and everything, but we are allied on certain core theological values that are essential to our shared lives, whether that's taking place in a local congregation or in an international conciliar body, like the Church World Service, for instance. It's very easy. All they have to do is write to us. The emphasis on, they can write directly to me at michael@religica.org. The emphasis on allies really is to ask ourselves to collaborate and ask ourselves, what can we create together? So we become allies, and then we create. And the kinds of things we like to create, again, as you've heard, our podcasts and blogcasts, all of those are just modalities. What we're really doing is focusing on the nature of story, because in a time where we've reached, as many of us experience in local congregations, there's a kind of hermeneutic of suspicion often about how we understand the role of religious authority or the voice of religious authority. But in culture, our sense here has been that suspicion does not immediately transfer to localized story. So with allies, we find an opportunity to interview you, to find out more about your community, and then to share that across the network so that others can hear those narratives. So for instance, recently I interviewed Jim Winkler on how we understand structural racism in the United States. What's interesting, and I just want to say this to your question, response to your question, Rocky, we use the method that the truth will arrive in dialogue. That means you have to have a lot of people around the table. When allies are around the table, the truth arrives in dialogue. People say interesting things to you. Jim Winkler, for instance, in that podcast, expressed something very interesting that had he not had that opportunity or that window, wouldn't have happened and wouldn't have been delivered to those communities. So it's about allies doing things creative together, and then trusting that that truth arrives in the dialogue, as we know happens from bilateral to multilateral dialogues. Given enough opportunity and time, people will get to a higher climb together. We do that with all of our allies. The last thing I would say is we ask allies what's servicing for them. Where do they have passion? What's working and what isn't? And when we can find patterns across allies, then we'd like to talk about that. So last example, we have a meeting coming up. I've asked Serene Jones and Mona Siddiqui from the University of Edinburgh and Mary Evelyn Tucker to talk about weariness in a pandemic age. How do we acknowledge weariness? And we're choosing themes with allies that we believe have purchase in all of our lives that we want to talk about. I'll pause there.
Okay.